Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. My name is John Hale. I'm an urban prepper, a fixer, who built a fortified log cabin while the city still pretended everything was fine. I didn't come out here to win arguments on the internet. I came to run a plan, track my numbers, and keep people breathing when noise turns small mistakes into big losses. I keep a log morning and night, date, time, weather, power, water, fuel, and one clean line on what changed and what I'll do next. Guessing after dark is how good days end badly. Numbers keep you honest, steps keep you calm. I lived in a concrete maze long enough to learn how thin the grid is. Elevators stall, sirens overlap, and a polite voice tells you service will return shortly while the street below stops making sense. So I built the cabin while the lights worked, and I hid it in timber where the gravel turns to brush before the gate. This place isn't a bunker. It's a small house that runs the same way every day. Pine walls, a tin roof, one stove, a spring upslope, a fence that rings when someone forgets to read. Simple wins when you're tired. Simple wins when you're scared. You'll hear what I built, why I chose it, and what I changed when it failed. You'll hear how we kept help at the box and danger at the fence. You'll hear how we used quiet instead of bravado. The city still sounded normal, and that was the lie I couldn't afford. I didn't start in the woods. I started in a one-bedroom above a bus line. Thin walls, a rack that hummed like a fridge, and a window that faced brick. I watched outage maps like weather and learned how fast calm breaks when elevators stall and card readers blink red. I kept a notebook for failures I could see coming, and pages ended the same. Build a way out before you need it. I built the cabin while the city argued. I ordered beams as garden kits, kept deliveries short, paid cash, and spaced truck days so nobody added them up. I set the site where the last stretch of gravel dies in brush, close enough to haul but far enough to forget. I chose pine for boring reasons. It stacks fast, seals tight, and stays warm with less wood. I cleared a ring so flame has nothing to climb and cut 2 paths I can follow in fog. Quiet power beats loud promises. A small wheel turns in the creek and feeds a battery bank steady and plain. A generator waits in the shed for short daytime runs. I wrote one step by both switches: run when the sun is up, kill noise before dark. A storm that was supposed to miss us did not. Rain went north, sirens overlapped. I checked the stair door, it stuck on a swollen hinge, and I kept my voice low. The super said the backup panel was fried, and I said I'd walk the floors and check on 5. I timed the silence between ambulances. It got shorter. New line: don't wait for announcements. I moved food and tools a little at a time. Buckets of rice and beans, jars that do not lie. Filters that work without a lecture. Hand tools first. I kept a rifle with a suppressor locked in a case and a crossbow with 6 bolts in oilcloth. I didn't brag, and I didn't take them out for comfort. Headlines went sideways on a Tuesday, then worse on Wednesday. A clip showed a man step into traffic on red and freeze on green. A nurse begged for masks and bleach, and her channel cut mid-sentence. The alert said stay home for 1 day, then stay home until further notice. I listened to the scanner. A dispatcher said hold for available, then stopped using names. That was enough. I packed like a drill. 3 piles. What keeps you alive? What keeps you moving? What keeps you honest when you're tired? Water and filters in the first. Boots, tape, cord, and a tarp in the second. Notebook, pen, spare glasses, and ID copies in the third. The rifle went in the truck, the crossbow in the footwell. I checked belts, hoses, and battery, and I wrote the odometer in the log. I left a note for my neighbor with the sleepy dog. Power may be out, water may slow, my stove is off, take what helps. I locked the door, walked the stairs, and knocked on 5. The woman in blue was fine, and I asked her to fill the tub while water still ran. I took back routes the map never picks. I avoided anything that looked like a line. I saw 3 cars nose to tail at a dark drive-thru and did not pull in. I kept the radio dark except for 2 short checks. The county line felt like a boundary. I topped off from a can, checked the cap twice, and kept moving. The highway narrowed to 2 lanes, then 1. The last station had a cash-only sign and a clerk relieved to see cash. He asked if I was going far. I said far enough. The road to the cabin is easy to miss. It slips behind fur, tilts to the creek, and the gravel gets tired before the gate. I woke the bell line with a fingertip and listened until it stopped. I counted to 5 and watched the trees settle. I killed the engine at the pullout and let the fan spin down. Arrival has a checklist. Park outside the fence. Scan the wire, check the hinge, clear the path, open only after you know. I stepped out slow, pack on, breath steady. A jay scolded from the alder and I said, "I'm not here for your nest." The woods ignored me. I rolled the gate open wide enough for the truck and watched the bell line where it crossed the drive at knee height. 1 ring means a touch, 2 means wait, 3 means you were asleep when you should be listening. The line held. The tin was quiet. The creek said what it says when nobody is here. I pulled through, shut the gate, dropped the pin, and set the bar on its pegs. I killed the engine by the gate, and the bell line rang once when no wind moved. Morning starts the same way because the first hour sets the rest. I read last night's line, add today's date, and leave space for numbers. Power, water, fuel, weather, 1 change. The pencil stays in the log. I crack the door and listen for 3 sounds. Water at the narrows, a tick from the bell line, and wind in needles. If I hear all 3, I move to checks. If one is wrong, I stop and find out why before I touch a switch. That keeps small problems small. Power comes first. A wheel in the creek feeds the batteries. I clear leaves from the intake, check the belt, and write the meter number. The generator is backup, daytime only, short runs for tools that need a push. We make noise when the valley is awake. Water stays simple. A covered box above the cabin feeds 2 tanks. First flow after rain goes to waste, so grit stays out. Drinking water passes gravel, cloth, and charcoal. If someone is new or worn down, we heat a batch to a mark and sign the time. Heat and cooking share 1 stove. I split rounds to wrist size, keep kindling dry, and dump ash in a lidded bin on bricks so a stray coal can't cost me a wall. I sweep the chimney before the cold because ladders lie when ice shows up. Food is boring by design. Buckets hold rice, beans, oats, flour, and salt. A card lists the open date and target weight. Sundays I check with a cheap scale. Jars sit low. Once a month I press each lid and toss anything that smells wrong. The building stays tight because tight means warm, quiet, and less scent. Foam closes cracks, felt pads, quiet hinges, mats catch grit. I cut brush back 10 paces and limb trees so sparks have nothing to climb. Waste has a path so the house doesn't. Gray water runs to a gravel pit. Kitchen scraps go to a barrel with a tight lid. Anything risky burns hot in a trench with the wind at my back. Soap, bleach, and rags live by a bucket marked wash only. Foot traffic is marked like a small shop. 1 path to the woodpile, 1 to the tanks, 1 to the creek, and a quiet loop that doesn't cross the others. I sweep those paths after rain and reset small stones because fresh scuff signal strangers. At dusk, I reverse the morning. I log the meter, note generator minutes, and walk the wire with a light in my pocket. I check bell hangers, latch doors, set the stove to a low coal, lay out tools for dawn. Light is useful and dangerous. Floods invite aim, so I keep them off unless I need a quick wash. Along the fence, I use shielded lamps that throw light down at my feet. The rules are short because tired minds like simple. The gate stays closed until separation is complete. Loud work waits for daylight. Tools go back where they came from. If it breaks, I write it and fix it before sleep. If the bell rings twice at night, I stop, count 5, and listen. Weapons stay last. A rifle with a suppressor is locked in a rack. A crossbow with bolts sits in a case near the door, and both live behind rules. If the fence and the ground do their job, the rack stays closed. If I take one out, I note the time and why, then put it back clean. I checked the hinge and ran a hand along the latch. Elise said west was quiet, and I reminded her to keep masks ready for the pass box. I read the battery number. Iris said the morning message printed clean, so I kept the window short and logged it. I walked the loop once more. Dax said the road was soft by the bend, and I asked him to park facing downhill and flag the rut. The day runs on repeatable steps. Write the change, fix the fault, stage the next task, then rest. Routine looks dull until the wire sings after midnight. Then you're glad it knows itself. Systems only help if they run the same way every day, so I built power, water, heat, and storage to work without speeches, and I check them in one order each morning because order keeps mistakes small and lets me spot drift when tired eyes want to skip. A small wheel in the creek turns a quiet alternator that feeds a battery bank at a pace you can sleep through. And I brush the intake screen, rake silt from the trench, and give the flow a minute to clear so bubbles do not trick the gauge. I read the meter, write the number, and feel the belt for frayed edges before I move on. Noise is a leak you cannot refill, so the generator runs in daylight only and only as long as a loud tool needs, and it sits on a gravel pad 5 steps from the shed so the frame will not walk and the exhaust will not kiss dry wood. Fuel lives in steel cans that still seal, lids painted with open month for rotation, and once a month I run the carburetor dry and write the minutes. A card by the cord lists 3 words: run, rest, record. And record means right now, not later. I keep a spare plug and wax paper and a short hose for a clean pour, and I stop the grinder on the timer even if the cut begs. Power is a timer on other jobs, so we charge when sun and creek can share the load. Headlamps first, then radios, then the small tablet for maps, and anything that blinks for fun stays dark unless it earns a socket. I read the number. Iris said the print matched yesterday, so I taped the note under the lid and moved to water. Water starts at a capped box upslope. First rush after rain goes to waste so grit stays out, and 2 plastic tanks sit in shade under the eave. I wipe caps before threads turn because a dirty thumb can cost a week you will not enjoy. Drinking water falls through gravel, cloth, and charcoal into a clean bin. If someone is new or worn down, we heat a batch to a mark and sign the time, and a second thermometer rests in a cup so it cannot roll. On the first Sunday, I check both and mark the handle with tape. I stood by the stove. Elise said the pot was ready, so I watched the shine at the edge and wrote the minute. The stove heats and cooks and dries gloves. It likes wood split to wrist size because small lights fast and smokes less. Kindling stays dry under the bench, ash goes to a lidded bin on bricks over dirt, and the setup lives far from walls so a stray coal cannot buy us a new one. I brush the flue when leaves turn, but before ice comes, chalk the latch so scratches show a hinge needs care, and keep a bucket of sand under the bench for the mistake we still have not made. Food is boring on purpose: rice, beans, oats, flour, and salt, with jars of meat and broth that sit low because heavy belongs near the floor. A card on each lid lists open date and target weight, and Sundays I call numbers while Iris writes, and drift gets eaten first. Bulged lids and cans that click go to the trash barrel without debate. We burn risk hot in a trench with wind at our backs and cover ash shallow so noses do not carry it home. A small spice tin lives by the stove because food that tastes like food keeps hands steady. I checked the shelf for a high ring. Elise said the row was quiet, so I pressed each lid and set one aside and wrote toss on the card. Tools live where hands expect them: wrenches by size over the bench, drivers tips down in a shallow tray, blades that can bite in a bright tin with a loud lid, and loud tools behind a chit so noise always has a reason you can speak before a switch moves. If someone says maybe, the grinder sleeps. Hand tools run first: clamps and saws that do not need a cord, and a fix-me tote collects dull and bent so broken does not sneak back on the wall. Spare belts sit bagged with a date and a note, and the oil can wears tape over the spout so dust minds its manners. Light is useful and dangerous, so floods stay dark unless a job needs a quick wash. Along the fence we use shielded lamps that throw light at our boots, not the trees, and we test them from inside. Headlamps wear red filters at night, and tape covers LEDs that blink for fun. If a device will not behave, it waits in a drawer until the sun is up. I taped a blinking blue that tried to sell our spot. Iris said the window was close, so I kept the message short and logged the minute. Paths do the same work every day. One to wood, one to water, one to the creek, and a loop that never crosses the others. We sweep after rain and reset small stones because fresh scuffs tell you someone missed a step before trouble says hello. I walked the loop. Dax said the bend in the road was soft and rutted, and I asked him to face the truck downhill and drive 2 stakes near the worst spot so we can watch the edge without stepping in it. Waste has a path so the house does not. Gray water runs to a gravel pit that soaks and cools. Scraps go to a barrel with a tight lid, and anything that can carry sickness burns hot in a trench. Soap, bleach, rags, and gloves live by a bucket marked wash only and stay there. When someone coughs, we split and hold. The fence is plain mesh on posts, tight at the bottom and higher than a shoulder, and the lowest run sits at shin height so weight rings a bell instead of slipping under. The bell hangs on a glass insulator and a spoon because metal on metal tells a story you can place in the dark. I do not hide the sign. Private road, do not enter, quarantine in effect. The letters are big and dull so they do not shine, and the post sits where a stranger will stop without touching the gate. The sign helps good people choose and gives the rest one more place to make noise before they reach steel. The approach bends twice because I said it that way, and no truck can rush a straight line to the gate. A dummy gate sits low on the old spur to catch the head down kind. Trip lines cross the drive at knee and waist, each tied to a small clacker, cheap and loud and ready when batteries are not. I paint the lines flat and run them through low eyes so they do not flash. And if a line breaks, a pin falls and a bell near the bed answers. Replacement cord hangs on a peg with a tag that says 1 cut, 1 tie, test. Light is useful and dangerous, so floods stay dark unless we need a wash, and along the fence we use shielded lamps that light our boots and keep the trees black. I test from inside with a switch. Sight beats light at night. The kitchen shutter has a slit at eye level so I can see the approach without fogging glass, and a small thermal on a shelf lets me check without opening doors. Batteries follow a day schedule so night never starts with empty. Noise can be a tool or a trap. The creek covers small mistakes if you work near the water, and a decoy rattle down the old skid road pulls interest toward a dead end before it finds the fence. A chime under the eave tells me when wind shifts, and I move jobs to match it. The watch point sits 20 paces downslope behind a stump, and from there you see the bend where strangers stand first. I do not sit in the window. I sit in brush and watch without showing the house. A short board holds glass and a pencil for clean notes. I checked the hanger knots. Elise said West was quiet and I reminded her to keep masks by the pass box. I traced the wire. Dax said the dummy gate looked real from the lower road, so I told him to keep the posts rough and the paint flat. I watched the fork. Iris said the decoy rattle still worked, so I marked the time and moved on. Bars sit on brackets behind the main door and I can slide them in without turning my back to the yard. Bolt-on panels hang on hooks and set with 2 screws, 1 person, 1 minute. The cellar holds air and a second exit, and the ladder hangs where a sleepy hand can find it. You do not call this a fort. You call it a small place with rules that do not change when nerves do, and you let the ground and the wire settle questions before voices try. The hinges know their sound. The bells know theirs. If a bell rings twice after midnight, we stop, count 5, and listen because the next sound decides the night, and we hold still. They came on foot mid-morning, slow and cautious like people who lost sleep and found the sign before the gate. 2 of them, a man and a woman, city jackets over trail pants, 1 empty bottle on a strap. They stopped at the post and raised open hands. I kept the door closed and spoke from the slit. State names, count, and how long you've stayed apart from others. The man looked at the woman before he answered. Evan and Rory, 2 total, 5 days since we saw anyone up close. I kept my voice low. Elise said West was quiet and I told her to hold at the pass box. I asked about fever, cough, and blood and they said no. I watched their feet and the space between them. You'll get water and food at the box, I said. The gate stays closed. Do you copy? The woman nodded. The man said understood. I walked the inside line, set a crate on the rail, and slid the pass box to the mark on the sign. 2 jugs, 4 bars, a small kit with masks, wipes, and soap. A note said, read and repeat. I backed to my mark and waited. The woman read it steady. No entry, no touch. Masks on now. Drink slow and do not linger. They drank, and I let silence make space for facts. The man asked to charge a phone. I said no, not at the fence. He nodded. The woman folded the note and slid it into her pocket. I read the battery number. Iris said the morning message went out clean, so we kept the radio dark and the window short. We do this the same way every time. I ask for yesterday's meals and today's water because stories show in small things. Evan said crackers and jerky. Rory said oats and a can of pears. I believed them because they didn't try to match. I asked where they were headed. The woman said east to the county bridge, then north if the road wasn't flooded. The man said the same with different words, and I wrote the plan in the margin. I pointed to the pullout beyond the deadfall and told them to sleep there if they stayed the night. No fires, no shouting, no lights except red. They nodded. I reminded them to leave the box where they found it. Then the small wrong details showed up. Mud caked high on their door seams that didn't match the dry track below. A thin smear on the man's cuff that didn't look like food or dust. The woman watching the bell line like she could hear a pitch I couldn't. I kept my voice flat. Elise said Wes stayed quiet, and I told her we were done at the fence. I asked them to step back to the sign and count to 10 out loud so I could hear their pace. They did. I listened for rush in the breath or drag in the step and heard steady feet. We closed it clean. They left toward the pullout, moved slow and sane, and never tried the gate. I wrote the minute and their names in the log, and I circled the smear in the mud because the first wrong note often comes soft. That night I kept the stove low and the lamps dark and stood by the slit more than I needed. I stayed on the porch at last light. Iris said the beacon minute rolled to 5 past, so I set the timer. I listened until the wire gave one tired tick and the wind answered with nothing at all. They asked to charge a phone, and I saw fresh mud where the road was dry. I pushed the box out and kept the gate closed. The day held, but the details didn't, and that mattered a lot. The radio lives in a wooden box on the shelf, wires neat, a switch labeled, and a paper wheel that tells us which minute our short message goes out today. 2 windows, morning and evening, both short because long calls invite trouble and waste power. We listen first and talk last. Morning opens at 9. I keep volume low and write what matters. Road closed here, smoke there, a clinic moved, a bridge down. We do not repeat names, we do not give maps. Place, count, need, then silence. I read the log. Iris said the wheel sat at 3 past, so I set the timer and kept my voice plain. Forest cabin east of the creek, not a shelter, water steady, power steady, report only, no approach to the gate. Then I released the switch and listened. A woman answered with a calm line. South Ridge Tower, 3 total, food 10 days, tracks on the timber road, no approach yet. I wrote her words and left space for updates. A man followed with a flat voice. River Farm, 5 total, 2 elders short on pills in 7 days, bridge shaky. I circled 7 days in the bridge. I kept breath steady. Elise said West was quiet, and I asked her to prep 1 small box in case the farm needed a pass later. The 3rd call came weak. Lake Road still stable. I wrote teen voice and did not ask a name. Evening sits at 7. We keep lamps low and speak soft because sound leaves warm houses. I read the numbers. Iris said batteries held, so we kept the window open for 2 minutes and no more. Our message says what we are and what we are not. We are a small house with a fence. We have water and calm. We have a box for help and a plan for risk. We are not a shelter. When we pass messages, we do it once and then stop. If South Ridge asks us to tell River Farm about the bridge, we say it once at the next window and do not repeat. I marked the map with a blunt pencil, no trails and no lines, just a dot for heard twice so we know where to aim ears tomorrow. Over time, the dots tell a story, a ring of voices that hold steady when the day looks weak. We keep one habit to cut mistakes. Before each call, Iris reads a short card: antenna connected, power good, log open, timer set, volume low, speak short. I kept my voice low. Iris said the minute rolled, so I keyed and sent the line. Forest cabin east of the creek, not a shelter, water steady, power steady, report only. A soft reply said Mill Road clear to the culvert, then a fallen pine passable on foot. I wrote foot only and underlined it. Dax asked with a look if we should go see. I shook my head and said later, and he went back to fuel. We do not chase fresh news at dusk. We decide with daylight. I heard a faint click on the tail and let it go. If someone wants to be found, they will give a place and a need. If not, we leave the air alone. At the end of each window, we read back our own lines. If a word feels soft, we fix it on paper. If a number drifts, we ask why and write the plan. I closed the lid and taped a light that tried to blink blue. Iris said the wheel moves to 5 past tomorrow, and I told her to change the pin and write it on the board. We keep the wire high and clear, we keep the message short, we keep names off the air, and we keep the gate closed. Tomorrow at 9, we listen again. They came at dusk in a van the color of wet primer, lights off and a handheld strobe in the passenger window. The beam flashed across the sign and the grill rose like a dog testing a fence. I kept the house dark and watched from the slit. The strobe pulsed 5 beats, paused, then 5 again. The beam drifted to the bell line and then to the dummy gate on the spur. I kept my voice low. Elise said west was quiet, and I asked her to hold the pass box and keep masks ready. I tapped the bar. Dax said the road was soft, so he parked the truck nose down. I read the meter. Iris said the window was closed, and I told her to keep the radio dark. No words from the van. The strobe held on the dummy gate. The driver killed the engine. A small drone lifted off the roof. It climbed to branch height and skated the approach in short jabs. I moved my eye, not my head. The drone paused over the bell line. The strobe died. The van went quiet. We let the drone have the spur. It hovered by the dummy gate, turned toward the real gate, and slid away. I waited for the bell. It did not ring. The drone was too light. I kept the rack closed. Elise said her kit was ready, and I reminded her safety stays on until I call it. I lifted the crossbow to the sill and set one bolt to test the weight. It found the decoy rattle next. It dipped. The rattle clicked. It bounced and slid back to the van. The passenger got out with the strobe and a green laser. He painted mesh, hinge, and sign like light could open steel. I kept the lights off. Iris said log the minutes, so I did. They walked to the spur, heads down. The strobe went low and found the trip line, then the clacker. He pinched the cord and killed it. The spur turns in and ends in slash that eats straight lines. A bell there tells me when they reach the bend. When it rang once, I counted to 5 and wrote the time. They pressed on. I kept the rifle on the rack. Elise said West stayed quiet, and I told Dax to hold by the cellar door. The laser never touched the real gate. The drone drifted over the roof and hung by the eave where the chime sits. The drone hovered like a fly on glass. They reached the dummy gate and found a latch that did nothing. The passenger waved the strobe and tried the bar. The bar did not move. I pointed to the latch and said, "Keep it locked until my mark." Elise nodded behind the shutter. We waited. The drone dropped toward the dummy hinge. The passenger laughed once and tossed a bolt at the post. The bell rang quick. The drone shot up. They froze. That bell lives alone on purpose. It tells them they did something and tells us they are far from the real gate. They swept brush for a lane and found none. Dusk went flat. The drone fell back to the van and went still. They returned to the sign. The driver traced a finger under quarantine. The passenger shined the strobe at his boots and hissed when light bounced. Iris said the minute rolled. I said keep it dark and write van drone decoy engaged, no breach. Dax asked if we should wash the bend with light. I said no. The ridge would throw the glow for miles. A single tone came from a phone speaker, then nothing. They started the engine, idled, killed it, then started again like they could starve us of patience. I held the crossbow low. Elise said west was still, and I told her to breathe and keep it simple. The van turned toward the lower road, rolled an inch, stopped, then crept into the bend where the rattle waits. It clicked once. The van stopped. It clicked again. The van reversed, then pulled forward and sank at the soft edge we had staked this morning. The tire spun and threw mud. They rocked it, gave up, climbed out, and stared at the rut. The drone tried to scout, nosed toward the slump, skated left and right, then came home. They packed their toys, closed the doors, and waited for a plan that did not arrive. When the last light left the trees, they decided. They took the bend slow and limped away with the rattle clicking until the sound fell into the creek. We did not open the gate. We logged the minute, checked knots, and kept the house dark. The call came in the evening window, steady and short like someone who practiced the line. A woman said roof over the ranger shed, 4 total, 1 bad ankle, 1 cut calf, 3 days apart, food low by morning. I wrote her words and left space. I kept my voice low. Iris said the wheel sat at 4 past, so I told her to pin the minute and close the lid after we answered. I asked 3 things in one breath: how many, how long intact, and any blood or spit. She said 4, 3 days, and no. I told her to hang a bright cloth at first light and save power, and then we left the air alone. Silence keeps plans clean. I checked the rack. Elise said her kit was ready, and I reminded her masks on and gloves on before the pass. Dax nodded, said he would keep the bar half set and the truck nose down. We pack without speeches. The quad takes a tarp, rope, a blanket roll, water, a small kit, and a litter strap. The truck sleeps when sound can carry. Iris said she would log start, route, and return, and I told her to keep the radio dark unless the minute demanded it. First light showed cloth on a roof 2 turns east. I watched a full minute for motion that did not belong. Then I went. The route climbs a cut where feet snag and drops toward the shed in a soft S. I coasted the last stretch and listened, because engines hide what you need to hear. The shed sits on a low slab with a stair to a flat roof. I parked on the blind side and spoke before I showed. I am at the rail, stay put and let me talk you down one by one. A woman leaned over with the cloth, a teen held a bag, an older man braced his leg, and another stood steady. We moved slow because slow is quiet. I set a tarp by the stair and kept it simple. Step to the tarp, sit where I point, no touch, follow words like a checklist. She said understood, and I asked the teen to go first so he could carry later. He came down careful, eyes on his feet, breath steady. The older man with the cut calf followed. The bandage looked clean and dry. The last one gritted through the bad ankle, and I strapped the foot so bumps would not become noise. We crossed the cut in 3 parts, coasted the falls, and killed the engine twice to listen. Twice we waited while 2 shapes drifted along the old road, heads turning to the small clicks straps make on bark. Patience buys quiet. At the gate, I stopped them 10 yards back and spoke the rule. You will not enter the house. You will go to the side room for 72 hours. Food and water pass through a box, and we talk through a small window. If anything changes, I call it. The woman repeated it. No entry, pass box only, masks stay on 3 days, you call changes. I said that is it. The side room is small, warm, and easy to clean. A heater on low, a table, 4 cots, a crate with masks, a thermometer, a jug, a basin, and soap. I slid the crate through the slot and asked for 2 checks, pulse and temperature. Elise said she would log the numbers, and I reminded her 1 cup per person and a mark on each so spoons do not wander. They ate soup and bread, and I watched because eating tells the truth when words try to help. The teen ate fast, then slowed. The older man kept the bowl steady. The ankle winced and then settled. The woman took a note and put the paper back. We kept checks each hour, then eased to 2 when nothing changed. That night I kept the windows short and the porch dark. Near midnight the bell tapped once and stopped. I waited the 5 count and wrote the minute. Morning brought a scare. Elise said the woman felt warm, so I told her to pass new masks, 2 cups, and a note that said sip and rest. The thermometer read 100.8, not panic, not nothing. We shifted to a tighter plan. Masks stayed on, towels split, and I marked a red dot by her name in the log. We walked their contact since the roof, no touch, no shared cups, no spit, no blood. By dusk, she sat at 99.7. I extended the clock 24 hours. Day 3 held steady, so we used the quiet. I showed the teen through the window how to start a call, listen first and speak last, and how to say less and mean more. He asked if he could try. I said later and told him to copy the weather without opinions. When the clock cleared, I lined them out of the room one by one, kept the house locked, and gave porch rules in short lines. We share work, not keys. We closed the log and the room went back to clean. Gate stayed closed. The pass box cooled on its rails and the bell ticked once, then went still while we waited. We split work into blocks because blocks beat moods. Morning checks, first work, quiet hour, second work, evening checks. A clear table starts the day. A clean log ends it. Habits carry us when nerves shake. I kept my voice low. Elise said she would take care in hygiene, and I nodded, told her to tape a hand wash card by the stove and mark field only on anything risky. She set a bin with gloves and wipes by the pass box. Dax took fuel and tools. He bled air from the line when the generator ran, tracked minutes, and stacked dull blades in a fixed tote so Broken stopped sneaking back on the wall. He parked the truck nose down, kept the quad ready, and marked cans with month and weight. Iris took radio and maps. She kept the wheel for the minute, pinned the next window, and wrote the picture with small dots. Heard twice, heard once, avoid if wet. She tuned with the squelch tight, and I reminded her to keep names off air and to read back our lines before we close. We run signals like we run tools. 1 tap stop, 2 hold, 3 backtrack, and radios carry the same rhythm. If someone freezes, the line holds. Nobody rushes the person who is listening. Small friction surfaced. Elise saw Dax set oily rags near the stove and raised an eyebrow. I kept it simple. She said move those to the metal bin, and I thanked her and told him to do it now. Dax watched Iris tape over a blinking LED. He grinned and said it made the room look dead. I said dead is good. I wrote 3 rules on the board. Loud work at noon, not dawn. Tools go back to the same hook. The person who breaks it writes it and schedules the fix. Rules that fit on a hand fit in a head. I checked the hinge and the latch. Elise said West was quiet, and I asked her to run a quick temp round before lunch. She did, then wiped the pen and the card. Dax found the grinder wheel low and said he could finish 1 more cut. I shook my head and reminded him the timer calls it, not the cut. He logged stop. Iris asked if the teen could try the mic. I said yes after the window, and she told him to copy the forecast once. Quiet hour means no saws, no hammering, radios low, and a sweep to reset. We rest because tired minds turn small problems into noise. We eat rice in a jar and read the board for what fixes first light. We close the day with practice. Bars slid into brackets, panels staged, water inside, batteries charging, stove to coal. I stood at the door, felt the wood, and set the bar back on its pegs. The last line in the log read what changed and what we will do at dawn. We added 4 hands to a small house, and it did not tip. The plan held because the steps stayed short, and short steps are what you can keep when a bell rings at night, and you have 5 seconds to listen before you move. Iris pinned tomorrow's minute on the board. Elise agreed. A soft tap hit the post just after noon, and a man in a canvas jacket stood at the sign with a white bottle held high like a pass. He kept his other hand open, watched the bell line instead of the gate, and waited until I spoke from the slit. State your name, your count, and how long you've stayed apart. He said mark, 2 total, 5 days. I kept my voice low. Elise said West was quiet, and I asked her to stand by the pass box with gloves on. He raised the bottle so I could read the label. Antibiotics sealed, 1 night inside in trade. I watched his shoes. Dust from a road we don't use clung to the laces, and his jacket showed clean wear at the pocket. We keep help at the box and risk at the fence. I told him the rule and kept it plain. He said he understood, then added a price. He wanted the door. You'll get water and food at the box, I said, and a tarp for the pull-out if it rains. The bottle stays at the post. We test the seal and return it tomorrow if it's clean. He smiled like it was a script. I watched the line behind him. I kept my voice even. Elise said her kit was ready, and I told Dax to hold by the cellar door. Mark set the bottle on the cap, stepped back, and tapped the label. He said the seal was fresh. Turn it once. Slow. He turned it. The ring clicked on the way down like it had clicked before. Keep it locked. I slid the box to the mark, 2 jugs, 4 bars, masks, soap, and a note with our steps. Read and repeat, then step back to the sign. He read the words, then tried to talk around them. The road is getting crowded, he said. The van from last night was sniffing the lower bend. He could help manage the rush if we let him in. Where did you come from? East. From where east? The bridge. Which one? The big one. I wrote big one and let the silence push back. We don't open for stories. We open for numbers that add up. No entry, no exceptions. He said he could trade more tomorrow. Use the pull-out and keep the bottle at the post. He looked past me, tilted his head, then left the bottle and walked. They took the fork toward the lower road. We let 3 minutes pass. I stepped to the post with gloves on, lifted the bottle to the light and turned it once. Elise said she saw a hairline on the ring, and I reminded her the rule: bottle stays outside until we weigh it. I set it in a wired crate and hung the crate on the rail, air over the cap, sun on the seam, and a card that said do not touch until morning. Iris wrote the time. At dusk, a van rolled slow on the lower road, stopped at the fork and idled until the rattle clicked, then left. The bottle sat where we left it. The ring looked too clean in the last light. He wanted the door. He got the fence still. We do not swing for walls when terrain can work for us, so we studied the lower road and sketched a way to slow wheels without noise. Water does free labor if you guide it, and the bend already sagged where clay met fill, so we marked the weak seam and planned around it. I kept my voice low. Elise said the air was calm, and I asked Dax to bring shovels, stakes, cord, and silt fence. Iris said she would mark sight lines and log the minute we started. We walked in daylight and left the truck home. The creek covered small sounds and the plan stayed simple. Clear debris at the intake, open a shallow cut that steers water to the seam, knock a rotten plank when the rise comes so the first surge looks for the low side and brace our edge so it holds. At the ditch we worked small. Dax raked the catch, Elise set silt fence, Iris cut brush for bundles, and I scraped a hand's width trench toward the seam, then a boot's width, then stopped to see if the trickle learned the path. It did. The flow found soft ground and darkened the lane in a crescent. I checked the bend. Iris said the lower road was quiet, and I told her to flag the worst slump so we could judge movement from the fence. Dax drove stakes and ran cord across safe dirt, a sight line we could watch without standing in it. We waited for the rise, just enough to push a sheet across. I set the bar under the plank and eased it so water took the lane we gave it. Thin streams bled from seams, then a hairline opened and silt plumed. By noon the tire path settled. By 2 it cracked. By 3 a shallow bite let go with a soft slump. No blast, no smoke, just time doing the work we asked. We left the ditch running but small stacked stone where a storm might take more than we wanted, and brushed our prints so the change looked like weather. The road would slow wheels, but feet still chase noise, so we drew a second plan. A sound maze that bleeds interest away from the gate. We used what we had. Thin sheet from a broken stove, 2 hollow cans, a length of nylon, 3 short rods, and a frame of deadfall. The goal was a tone wind could own and people could not fake. We rigged the frame down the fork where the rattle lives. Nylon held the sheet so a steady gust gave a steady tremble. The cans hung on rods so they chimed in pairs only when a pull came from the path. I kept my voice even. Elise said West stayed quiet, and I asked her to tape a note on the inside switch. kill floods while the maze learns its wind. We tested at dusk. The creak gave the bass. The sheet gave a low tremble. The cans stayed still. When I dragged a stick across the fork, one can tapped and the other answered 3 beats late. I wrote the pattern in the log. Steady tremble means wind. Single tap means loose branch. Paired taps means feet in the fork. Dax asked if we should hang more cans. I said no. We left slack in the nylon so cold would not snap it and tied a fall pin to a bell near the bed. If the line broke, the pin dropped and the bell would wake us. By morning, the slump grew. 2 sets of prints stopped at the break and turned into brush. The cans told us when they passed the fork, tap, tap, pause, then nothing for a long time. We did not chase. We logged and repaired. Dax reset stakes, Iris updated the dot, and Elise wrote maze holds in the margin. Midday brought a test. A van rolled to the bend and idled, then tried the ledge and changed its mind. 2 got out and walked. The sheet trembled. The cans stayed quiet until they hit the fork, then tap, tap, pause. They turned toward the noise and left the road. Brush tangled legs. I held the crossbow low. Elise said west was still, and I reminded her safety stays on. When they left, the slump peeled another lip from the lane. We added one last piece, a reflector on a hidden stake aimed at the slit so a small headlamp line would bounce back at us and not out, and a mirror down low to see the fork without leaning. Iris said the angle was good, and I told her to mark the stake for snow. The ground can be your ally if you stop asking it to be a wall. The ditch runs, the road sags, the fork sings when feet wander, and the gate stays a choice no one can rush. That buys nights that feel like normal. At last light, the sheet trembled, the cans went still, and the bell line did not move at all. Night ran flat and cold. The spillway at the old dam groaned, then went quiet, and small sounds took over the ridge. We killed lamps, taped the last blink, and checked the board. Bars ready, panels staged, water inside, batteries charging, stove to coal. We listened together and waited for quiet. I kept my voice low. Elise said west was still, and I asked her to slide the pass box to cool and keep masks by the slit. Dax checked the hinge and latch, said the bar would seat clean, and I told him to hold by the cellar door. Iris said the minute rolled to 3 past, and I told her to skip the call and keep the radio dark. The first sign was the wrong rhythm in the trees. Wind has a beat, you learn. This came in lumps, then lull, then 3 scrapes like sleeves on bark. I watched the bend where strangers stand first and let edges turn true. The maze earned its keep. The sheet trembled and the cans stayed quiet until feet found the fork. Then 2 taps, pause, 2 taps again. I wrote the minute and the pattern. I pointed to the latch and said keep it locked until my mark. Elise nodded and set a hand on the passbox bolt. Dax breathed once and took his place by the cellar. Iris held a pencil to the log. Shapes filled the bend, not marching, just drifting until the brush turned them. Heads lifted when the sheet hummed, then twisted toward the taps that sounded like home. They followed sound because sound hooks when the brain is wrong. The first pressure hit the lower mesh and rang once, then again, then went thin as weight leaned and held. The bell line sang high and stuck like a finger on glass. I counted to 5 and did not touch a switch. I kept the rifle in the rack. Elise said west stayed still, and I reminded her steel comes out when ground fails, not before. Dax watched the hinge through a crack and kept his thumb on the wood, feeling for lift. Crowds with no plan move like tides. The first row leans until feet slip, the second row pushes, then everything stalls as bodies pile and forget. The hinge knocked twice when a hand found the latch by accident. The bar held. Dust fell from the jamb. I tapped once on the frame and Iris wrote hold. Minutes stretched. The fork pulled feet away and bled pressure from the mesh. Still, a handful stayed at the latch, drawn to the small knock, and every time metal kissed, others drifted back. I kept the stove low to hold the flue warm. Elise said air was steady, and I asked her to speak numbers once a minute. She read battery, air, stove, gate. Iris wrote them. Dax stared at the hinge like it could lie. A body slid down the mesh and found the bar with a shoulder. Wood groaned. The latch lifted a hair and kissed steel. 3 knocks. Too close. I gave the call. Inside, shutters set, cellar ready, generator off, radios on vibrate, move. We went the way we practiced. Bars slid into brackets, screws grabbed panels, the pass box bolt sat home, and the cellar door opened on cool dark. We went down with a hand on the rail and a hand on the wall so boots did not slip. The cellar is split. Batteries and tools on one side, people on the other. Both vent. A small sensor watches oxygen. Numbers do not save you, but they stop ghosts. Elise called 80 steady. Iris wrote it. Dax watched the stairs so I could listen at the floor vent. The bells sang thin. The mesh scraped. The hinge kissed steel and went quiet, then kissed again when a shoulder found lift. I counted the gaps. 5, 8, 11. The trend was right. Pressure was bleeding toward the maze, toward sound that led nowhere. I kept my voice low. Iris said a stone ticked by the dummy gate, and I told her to mark it and ignore unless it repeated. Dax whispered. The bar creaked but felt strong. I told him to breathe and keep his palm on the wood. We sat with it. No sweeps, no lights. The maze did work. The slump did work. The fence did work. Every few minutes the hinge spoke like a question. Every answer was the same. Stay shut. A phone tone cut from the lower road, then silence. I pictured the canvas jacket and the white bottle and did not let that thought grow. The push faded. The sheet trembled alone. The cans kept quiet. The bell line went still. I let 2 minutes pass. Then we moved back up in the same order. Dax checked the bar. Elise watched the slit. Iris read the battery. I felt the hinge. It eased back. The yard showed scuffs where boots had slid and 2 bent ties on the mesh where weight leaned and learned nothing. The fork rattle hung true. The sheet line hummed low. I touched the latch. Warm. We do not declare victory. We declare stable and work. Dax reset knots and rubbed the hinge with a rag. Elise brushed dust off the sill so new marks would show. Iris took 1 photo for the log. We ate oats and read numbers. We wrote the list: fence check, bell knot, rattle cord, sheet tension, road edge. We slept in shifts, not to fight, but because dawn is when tired people lose simple plans. Before light, the cans tapped twice, then went still. A shape wandered the lower road and stopped at the slump like it had been told to go straight, and the ground disagreed. It turned into brush. The brush said no. At first light, I walked the inside fence and felt the mesh. It hummed like a guitar left after the set. I kept my voice low. Elise said west was clear, and I asked her to run a quick temp round on us. We stepped to the bend and read the ground. The slump had grown another bite. The ledge was a lip no wheel would trust. Scuffs split around the break and vanished into deadfall. The ground made the choice. We reset what mattered. Dax retied the fork rattle and trimmed the tail. Iris checked the reflector stake and the low mirror and chalked a line for the angle. Elise wiped the pass box rails and reloaded a crate for the day. We walked back slow. The creak sounded like work, not warning. The wire did not sing. The wind held. I stood on the porch with a hand on the bar and the other on the frame. We had asked the plan to hold. It had. I logged times, wrote what broke, and wrote what we would fix at first light. Even though first light had arrived, the list was short. The rifle stayed in the rack. The crossbow stayed cased. We kept a small place ours for 1 more cycle of dark and light. That buys breakfast. Before we closed the book, a last sound came from the trees, a dry rake like fingers on bark, then nothing. I wrote it and drew a small box next to it. We ended with 1 line. The hinge lifted once. Metal touched metal, and we had 3 minutes to be right. We were. Now we go chop wood, check water, and let the maze earn its keep again. That is enough. We trade quiet, not favors. The cache sits under a ledge at a dry seep, 2 hands deep, a plastic bin under stone, 3 flat rocks on top, and a fir cone as the mark. We only use it when a voice stays steady twice and never asks for our gate. I kept my voice low. Iris said the south ridge checked in, and I told her to pull the map and circle the seep. Dax carried a tarp and a small spade, and Elise packed 2 sealed bags for trade. We walked the quiet line. No talk, no metal. At the shelf, I tapped the cone aside and scraped until the lid showed dull and clean. I lifted it to the tarp so sand stayed out. Inside sat rice, beans, and a card in blue ink, trade even. I nodded and passed the first bag, then the second, and Elise wrote what we left and why. We took half and left half, then added 2 wool socks and a radio battery in a dry bag. I kept the lid level. Dax said the seal looked true, and I reminded him to wipe the rim before we closed. Iris asked if we should change the cone. I said no, we reset it as found. We covered prints with boughs and walked out on the same line. Back at the fence, I wrote the note clean. Cash held, trade even, no names, return in 7. I kept the rules simple. Elise said she'd log the weights, and I told her to tape the card over the bench. We do not talk about a place that feeds us. We take what we need, leave what we can, and write it down. The cone points to food, but it also points to trust. Spring thinned the snow, the creek rose, and work shifted from defense to upkeep. We cut grass low, limbed pines to head height, and scraped a bare ring around the cabin so sparks die where dirt starts. Gutters came first. We cleared to metal, checked downspouts, set a mesh cap on the flue, and ran a hose from the barrels to prove flow. We treat the road like a fire line. Dax widened turns, shaved the berms where hot air stalls, and dragged dead limbs to a pile far from walls. The truck faces downhill with a half tank and 2 totes, food and blankets, plus a box with copies of IDs and the log. I kept my voice low. Elise said air was clean, and I asked her to stage masks and wet rags by the door for smoke. Inside, we moved heat and fuel apart. Paint cans sealed, gas in the shed on gravel, a sand bucket by the stove. We marked valves with bright tape so anyone can open water and smoke without guessing. Iris set reflectors on 2 trees so lines make sense in the dark, then hung 3 tiny mirrors to check bends without stepping loud. We audited the pantry. Heavy sits low, daily use sits high, jars that click go out. I called weights. Iris wrote. Elise stacked what drifted close to empty. Boring food is still food when nerves fray. We planted beans and potatoes in 2 raised beds so jars stretch and hands stay busy. Schedules change with light. Morning moves earlier, evening stretches. The beacon stays short. On red flag days, we listen more, talk less, and report only weather, road, and smoke. I kept my voice even. Iris said tomorrow's minute moves to 2 past, and I told her to pin it and tape over any blink that tries to show off. We ran the night route again, slow and quiet, so feet remember when nerves forget. Bars slide, panels set, water in, batteries charge, stove to coal. 1 clear table, 1 sharp pencil, 1 line on what changed and what fixes at dawn. The rules stay short. The gate stays closed until separation is done. Loud work waits for noon. Tools go back where they came from. If it breaks, write it and fix it before sleep. Smoke thinned by noon, and the radio carried a voice that knew my name. The voice said my name once, quiet and plain, like someone who didn't want to spook me. I kept my breath slow. Iris said the meter looked steady, and I told her to keep the radio dark. The caller gave a place without a map. South Ridge, High Line, 3 total, and added 1 line. We pass this way tomorrow. We kept the house dark and the yard still. We waited. We listened. I did not answer then. I taped the slit, wrote the minute, and let the house do its last lap. Bars set, panels staged, water in, stove to coal. We chose routine over noise. At dusk, I keyed the switch for 2 seconds and gave what we always give, report only, no names, no approach to the gate. The reply came calm. Copy, no approach. 3 total, still stable. I ended there because short survives strangers. We ate oats and split a jar. I cleaned the crossbow and put it away. Elise said west was quiet, and I reminded her to rest. Dax checked the hinge and logged it. Iris pinned tomorrow's minute and taped over every blink. I stood at the door and held the bar. The creek spoke. The wire stayed still and the wind moved under the eave. If you reach our sign, read the card, speak early, and follow the steps. You will get water. You will get a box. You will not get the gate. We hope for calm, plan for bad, and work the middle every day. If you listened this far, like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. We'll be here in the morning, same rules, same table, one sharp pencil, and a plan that still holds.